Sometimes the cruelest thing people can do is make you hope when they've already decided to laugh. Cameron Carter knew that feeling as he sat alone at Bellamy's Café during the lunch rush, wearing his only good shirt, waiting for a blind date his co-workers had arranged as a joke. A single father barely scraping by, he was their entertainment for the afternoon. Then Vivienne Ashcroft walked in, a millionaire CEO who could buy the entire café without checking her account. Everyone waited for her to turn around, to laugh, to destroy him. Instead, she sat down. She spoke with kindness. She saw him. What could a woman who had everything possibly want with a man who had nothing? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through the darkness at 5:30 in the morning, the same as it did every day. Cameron Carter's hand shot out from under the thin blanket, silencing it before it could wake the children. For a moment, he lay there in the pre-dawn stillness of his cramped bedroom, gathering the strength to face another day. The ceiling above him bore a water stain, shaped like a question mark, a fitting symbol, he sometimes thought, for the uncertainty that defined his life. He rose quietly, his joints protesting the movement. At 34, he felt older than his years, worn down by the weight of responsibility and worry. The apartment was cold. The landlord kept promising to fix the heating, but promises were cheap and repairs were expensive. Cameron pulled on his work clothes, thick canvas pants and a flannel shirt that had seen better days, and padded into the kitchen. The refrigerator door opened with a tired sigh, revealing its modest contents. Eggs nearly expired, a half-gallon of milk, bread for sandwiches, some leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. Cameron did the mental arithmetic he performed every morning, calculating meals against paychecks, counting days until the next bill was due. It was a mathematics of survival, and he'd become an expert at it. On the refrigerator door, held up by a faded magnet, was Autumn's latest drawing, a crayon masterpiece depicting their family. 3 figures, himself tall and thin, 7-year-old Autumn with her bright yellow hair, 10-year-old Preston with his serious expression. The 3 of them holding hands under a smiling sun. No 4th figure. There hadn't been a 4th figure in 3 years. Not since Karen died. Cameron's throat tightened, as it always did, when he thought of his late wife. The illness had come suddenly, aggressively, giving them no time to prepare. 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. The medical bills had arrived for months afterward, each one a fresh wound. He'd sold everything of value, borrowed from family, until there was no one left to ask, and still the debt remained, a shadow that followed him everywhere. He cracked 3 eggs into a pan, scrambling them with practiced efficiency. Toast popped up. He poured 2 glasses of milk and 1 cup of instant coffee for himself. The morning routine was a kind of meditation, his hands knowing the movements while his mind wandered. At 6:15, he woke the children. Preston emerged from the bedroom he shared with his sister, already dressed, his dark hair sticking up in the back. He was growing so fast, his pants were too short again, Cameron noticed, with a pang of guilt. New clothes would have to wait until next month. "Morning, Dad," Preston said, his voice still thick with sleep. "Morning, son. Breakfast is ready." Autumn appeared moments later, dragging her worn, stuffed rabbit by one ear. She climbed into her chair and smiled up at him with the kind of pure, uncomplicated joy that made his heart ache. How did children do that? How did they find happiness in the smallest things when the world around them was so uncertain? "Are we having pancakes?" she asked hopefully. "Not today, sweetheart. But we've got eggs and toast. Your favorite." She accepted this with the resilience children possess, digging into her breakfast with enthusiasm. Preston ate more quietly, watching his father with an expression that seemed too old for his age. Sometimes Cameron worried that his son understood too much, saw too clearly the struggles his father tried to hide. They ate together in the small kitchen, the radio playing softly in the background. These morning moments were precious to Cameron. The 3 of them together before the day's demands pulled him away. He asked about school, about homework, about their plans. Preston had a math test. Autumn's class was learning about butterflies, normal childhood concerns, in an abnormal situation. At 7 o'clock, Cameron walked them down 3 flights of stairs to Mrs. Cordova's apartment. His neighbor, a widow in her 70s, watched the children before and after school for a price Cameron could barely afford but couldn't do without. She answered the door in her housecoat, her silver hair in rollers, her face creasing into a warm smile. "Good morning, mijos," she said, ushering the children inside. To Cameron she added quietly, "You look tired, hijo." "I'm fine, Mrs. Cordova, thank you. You work too hard." "A man needs rest, needs more than work." He nodded, not trusting himself to respond. Mrs. Cordova saw too much, cared too deeply. He kissed his children goodbye and headed out into the cold morning. The bus ride to the warehouse took 40 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that gradually shifted from struggling to industrial. Cameron stared out the window, watching the city wake up. Other passengers dozed or stared at their phones. Everyone lost in their own private struggles, their own quiet desperation. The distribution center loomed like a gray fortress, all concrete and corrugated metal. Cameron clocked in at precisely 7:55, as he did every morning. 5 minutes early, never late. His supervisor, Dennis Crawford, was a fair man who appreciated reliability. In a world of uncertainties, Cameron's dependability was something he could control. The warehouse floor was a cavern of shelves and pallets, forklifts beeping as they navigated the aisles. Cameron's job was simple but physically demanding, loading trucks, organizing inventory, moving boxes that grew heavier as the day wore on. His co-workers were a mixed group, some friendly, some indifferent, some actively cruel in the way that people sometimes are when they see someone struggling more than themselves. Bryant Moss and Garrett Tucker fell into that last category. They worked the same shift, 2 men in their late 20s who seemed to find endless entertainment in making Cameron's life harder. Small things mostly. Hiding his equipment, mocking his worn clothes, making jokes at his expense, just loud enough for him to hear. Cameron endured it because he had to, because he needed this job, because pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. That morning, Bryant approached him during the 10 o'clock break, his expression friendly in a way that immediately put Cameron on guard. "Hey, Carter," Bryant said, leaning against the break-room vending machine. "Oh, got a minute? What do you need?" "Not need exactly. More like I've got something that might interest you." Cameron waited, wary. "My cousin, she's single, good-looking, works in the city. I showed her your picture from the company directory, and she thinks you're cute." Cameron blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Your cousin?" "Yeah, man. She wants to meet you." "How about lunch tomorrow? There's this cafe downtown, Bellamy's. Nice place. You interested?" Every instinct Cameron possessed screamed that this was wrong, that Bryant Moss didn't do favors, that there had to be a catch. But another part of him, the part that had been alone for 3 years, the part that remembered what it felt like to be wanted, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was real. "I don't know," Cameron said slowly. "Come on, what have you got to lose?" "One lunch. If it doesn't work out, no harm done." Garrett appeared beside Bryant, grinning. "Do it, man. When's the last time you went on a date?" 3 years. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days if he was counting, which he wasn't. Except he was. That evening, Cameron told his children about the invitation. They sat at their small kitchen table, the remains of dinner, spaghetti with jarred sauce, pushed aside. A date? Autumn's eyes went wide. "Like in the movies?" "Just lunch," Cameron clarified. "With someone I haven't met yet." Preston studied his father carefully. "Do you want to go?" "I'm not sure. Mama would want you to be happy," Autumn said with the certainty only a 7-year-old could possess. "She told me before she got really sick. She said if something happened to her, you should find someone to smile with." Cameron's eyes burned. "She said that to you?" Autumn nodded solemnly. "She made me promise to tell you when you were sad for too long." Across the table, Preston added quietly, "We're okay. Dad, we want you to be okay too." That night, after the children were asleep, Cameron stood on the small balcony of their apartment, looking out over the city lights. The cold air bit at his exposed skin, but he barely noticed. Karen's words, filtered through their daughter's memory, echoed in his mind. Find someone to smile with. He'd been surviving for 3 years. Surviving wasn't living. The next morning, Cameron did something he hadn't done in years. He used part of his emergency fund to buy a new shirt. Nothing expensive, just something from the discount store that didn't have frayed cuffs or faded patches. It was navy blue and fit reasonably well. In the changing room mirror, he barely recognized himself. By 11:45, he stood outside Bellamy's Café, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the large windows, he could see the lunch crowd, well-dressed professionals, couples laughing over salads, the hum of successful lives being lived. He didn't belong here, he knew it. Everyone would know it the moment he walked in, but he'd promised his children he'd try. He'd promised himself he'd stop just surviving. Cameron pushed open the door and stepped inside. The cafe hostess greeted him with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Cameron mumbled something about meeting someone and gestured vaguely toward the dining area. She nodded and returned to her podium, already dismissing him. He chose a table near the back corner, away from the windows, but with a clear view of the entrance. The chair felt too nice, the table too clean. Everything about this place screamed money in a language he didn't speak. Other diners glanced at him briefly before returning to their conversations, but he felt the weight of their assessment, the quick calculation of whether he belonged. Cameron ordered coffee he couldn't afford and checked his phone. 11:53. Bryant had said noon. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. At 11:57, he saw them. Bryant and Garrett standing across the street, phones out, laughing. They weren't even trying to hide. The sick realization settled in his stomach like a stone. This was the punchline. He was the joke. He should leave. Walk out with whatever dignity he could salvage. But his legs wouldn't move, paralyzed by humiliation and the horrible certainty that leaving now would only give them more to laugh about. The warehouse worker who got scared and ran. They'd tell that story for months. So Cameron sat frozen, gripping his coffee cup, waiting for the inevitable. At precisely noon, the door opened. The woman who entered made every head in the cafe turn. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was, and having no reason to apologize for it. Tall, perhaps 40, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style that probably cost more than Cameron's monthly grocery budget. Her suit was understated but obviously expensive, charcoal grey, perfectly tailored. She wore minimal jewelry, a watch that caught the light, small diamond earrings, a simple pendant. But it wasn't her appearance that commanded attention. It was the way she inhabited space, the way she scanned the room with sharp, assessing eyes, the air of authority that surrounded her like an invisible cloak. Vivienne Ashcroft. He knew who she was, because everyone knew who she was. CEO of Ashcroft Industries, one of the most successful tech companies in the region. Worth more money than Cameron could conceptualize. The kind of person whose decisions affected thousands of lives, who appeared in business magazines, who moved in circles so far above his own they might as well be different planets, and she was walking directly toward his table. Cameron's mind went blank. This couldn't be happening. This was beyond cruel. Bryant had somehow convinced Vivienne Ashcroft herself to participate in this humiliation. How? Why would someone like her agree to Cameron Carter? Her voice was warm, surprisingly so. Yes, the word came out as barely more than a whisper. I'm Vivienne. May I sit? He nodded, unable to form words. She sat across from him with easy grace, setting her purse aside, meeting his eyes directly. There was no mockery in her expression, no barely suppressed laughter, just steady, genuine attention that made him feel more exposed than any ridicule could. Have you ordered? She asked. Just coffee. She signaled the waiter, who appeared instantly with the kind of attentiveness Cameron had never experienced in any restaurant. We'll both have the autumn salad with grilled chicken, and I'll have a sparkling water with lime. The waiter nodded eagerly and disappeared. Vivienne returned her attention to Cameron. I hope you don't mind that I ordered for us. The salad here is excellent, and we both need to eat. You work the warehouse shift, don't you? That's physically demanding. You need proper nutrition. Cameron stared at her, utterly lost. I don't understand what's happening. We're having lunch, she said simply. Tell me about yourself, Cameron. What do you do at the distribution center? I'm sorry, but why are you here? Why are you doing this? Something flickered in her eyes. Respect, maybe, for his directness. Because I was invited to meet you. And because I believe in showing up when I say I will. This is a joke. My coworkers set this up to... He couldn't finish the sentence. To humiliate you, Vivienne said quietly. Yes, I'm aware. The words hung between them. Cameron felt his face burning. She knew. She knew, and she was here anyway, which somehow made it worse. Then why? Because I've been the punchline before, she said, her voice taking on an edge. Because I know what it feels like to be underestimated, mocked, dismissed because of where you come from or what people think you're worth. And because you showed up anyway, knowing the risk. That takes more courage than most people have. Their food arrived. The waiter set down plates with a flourish, offering fresh pepper and parmesan. Vivienne accepted both. Cameron barely noticed. I should go, he said. You could, she agreed. Or you could stay and have lunch with me. Have a genuine conversation. Let their cruel joke become something else entirely. What else could it become? Whatever we want it to be. Cameron picked up his fork, more to have something to do with his hands than from any appetite. Vivienne ate with unhurried precision, seemingly unbothered by his confusion. You have children, she said after a moment. It wasn't a question. 2, a daughter 7, a son 10. How did you... Your phone wallpaper. I noticed when you checked it earlier. They're beautiful. He found himself looking at his phone, at the photo of Autumn and Preston grinning at the camera, taken last summer at the free outdoor pool. They're everything to me. Tell me about them, and somehow, impossibly, he did. Cameron heard himself talking about Preston's love of reading, how the boy could lose himself in books for hours, how he worried about his son taking on too much responsibility too young, about Autumn's endless creativity, her drawings that covered their refrigerator, her ability to find joy in the smallest things. Vivienne listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested. Not the performative interest of someone being polite, but real engagement. You're a single father, she said. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. It was fast. I'm sorry. That's an inadequate thing to say, but I am sorry. Thank you. It must be difficult, raising them alone while working full-time. We manage. The words came automatically, the same ones he'd said 1,000 times. But then, for reasons he couldn't explain, he added, It's harder than I thought anything could be. Every day feels like walking a tightrope. One unexpected expense, one sick day, one mistake, and everything falls apart. I'm terrified all the time that I'm not enough, that I'm failing them. Vivienne set down her fork. The fact that you're terrified means you care. Bad parents don't worry about whether they're good enough. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I am. I grew up poor, Cameron. Not struggling, poor. The kind of poor where you wear the same clothes all week, where dinner is whatever you can find, where heat is a luxury. My mother worked 3 jobs. My father left when I was 8. I remember what it feels like to be hungry, to be cold, to be looked at like you're less than human because you don't have money. Cameron stared at her, trying to reconcile this story with the woman sitting across from him in her expensive suit. I worked my way through community college, then state university, she continued. Scholarships, loans, night shifts at a gas station. I started my company in a garage with $3,000 and a laptop I bought used. That was 18 years ago. Now we have 2,000 employees, and we're worth $500 million. That's incredible. It's exhausting, she said with a slight smile. Success doesn't erase where you came from. I still check price tags. I still feel guilty spending money on anything that isn't necessary. I still remember what it's like to count pennies and hope you have enough. A waiter approached, with exaggerated politeness toward Vivienne, barely glancing at Cameron. Ms. Ashcroft, can I get you anything else? Perhaps dessert, coffee. Before Vivienne could respond, he turned to Cameron with barely concealed dismissiveness. And for you, sir? Vivienne's expression hardened. Actually, you can start by addressing my companion with the same respect you show me. He's my lunch guest, and if you can't treat him appropriately, I'll speak with your manager about finding someone who can." The waiter's face went pale. "I apologize. I meant no disrespect. Then show none. We'll both have coffee." "Thank you." The waiter retreated hastily. Around them, several nearby diners had overheard the exchange. Cameron felt every eye in the cafe on them. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did. Small cruelties accumulate. Someone has to call them out." Something shifted in Cameron's chest, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself, a small space where hope might grow. This woman, this impossibly successful, powerful woman, had just defended him, had treated him like he mattered. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. Why are you really here?" "Bryant Moss is just a warehouse worker. His cousin couldn't possibly. This whole setup makes no sense." Vivienne was quiet for a moment, considering. "I heard about this little prank through some connections. Word travels in certain circles. When I learned what they were planning, a cruel joke at the expense of a hard-working single father, it made me angry. So I made a few calls and arranged to be the date myself." "You came here to what? Rescue me?" "I came here because I wanted to. Because I could. Because watching bullies get what they deserve is one of life's small pleasures." She leaned forward slightly. "But I'm staying because I'm enjoying this conversation." "You're genuine, Cameron. That's rarer than you might think." Their coffee arrived, served with elaborate care. Through the window, Cameron could see Bryant and Garrett still watching. But their expressions had changed from anticipation to confusion. "They thought you'd laugh and leave," Cameron said. "I know. I'm sure that's disappointing for them. What happens now?" Vivienne pulled a business card from her purse and wrote something on the back. She slid it across the table. "This is my personal number. Not my office line, not my assistant. Me. Call me if you'd like to have dinner sometime. Or coffee. Or just talk." Cameron picked up the card, solid cardstock with elegant lettering. On the back, written in flowing script, "Vivienne, 55350147. I meant what I said. Call me. V. I don't understand why you'd want that. Because you showed up today even though you suspected it was a trap. Because you love your children enough to be terrified of failing them. Because you're honest about your struggles instead of pretending they don't exist. Because in the 20 minutes we've been talking, you've been more real with me than most people manage in months." She stood, gathering her purse. "Think about it. No pressure, but I hope you'll call." "Wait, you're leaving?" "I have a meeting at 2. But this was lovely, Cameron. Thank you for having lunch with me." She placed cash on the table, far more than necessary, and walked toward the door with the same confidence she'd entered with. At the entrance, she turned back and smiled at him, a genuine expression that transformed her entire face. Then she was gone, leaving Cameron alone with an empty plate, a business card, and the impossible weight of hope. Cameron walked back to work in a daze, the business card burning a hole in his pocket. The afternoon shift passed in a blur of physical labor and racing thoughts. Bryant and Garrett kept their distance, clearly confused by how their prank had unfolded. Other co-workers asked questions he deflected with vague answers. Only Dennis seemed to understand that something significant had happened, giving Cameron a knowing nod, but asking nothing. The bus ride home felt different somehow, as if the city itself had shifted while he wasn't looking. Cameron stared at his reflection in the window, trying to see what Vivienne had seen. He looked the same as always, tired, worn, ordinary. Nothing special, nothing that would attract the attention of someone like her. Mrs. Cordova handed over the children with her usual efficiency, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. "Something happened today," she said. "It wasn't a question. I had lunch with someone. The blind date. It went well?" "I think so. I'm not sure." "It was unexpected." She patted his arm. "Life is unexpected, hijo. That's what makes it worth living." Upstairs, Preston and Autumn attacked him with their usual enthusiasm, talking over each other about their day. Cameron made dinner, macaroni and cheese from a box, carrot sticks, apple slices, and listened to their chatter. Normal life, familiar rhythms. But underneath it all, the business card waited in his pocket like a promise or a threat. After dinner, while the children worked on homework at the kitchen table, Cameron stood at the sink washing dishes and allowed himself to think about it. About her. Vivienne Ashcroft had spent her lunch hour with him, a warehouse worker she'd never met, because she'd wanted to disrupt a cruel joke. She'd defended him to a waiter. She'd shared her own story of poverty and struggle. She'd given him her personal number. None of it made sense. People like her didn't do things like this. Did they? Dad? Preston's voice cut through his thoughts. You're washing the same plate over and over. Cameron looked down. His son was right. He rinsed the plate and set it in the rack. Sorry, mind wandering. Are you thinking about your date? Autumn asked, not looking up from the picture she was coloring. How did you get a funny look on your face, like when you're trying to solve a hard problem out of the mouths of children. Cameron dried his hands and sat down at the table with them. Can I ask you both something serious? They looked up, suddenly attentive. Serious conversations were rare in their house, reserved for important matters. If I started spending time with someone, a woman, how would you feel about that? Preston considered the question carefully, his expression thoughtful. Is she nice? Yes, very nice. Does she make you smile? Autumn added. She did today, yes. Then we want you to see her, Preston said with the certainty of someone much older. You've been sad for a long time, Dad. We see it even when you try to hide it. If someone makes you smile, that's good. Autumn nodded vigorously. Mama would want you to be happy. She told me so. Remember? Cameron's throat tightened. I remember, sweetheart. Then you should call her, Preston said practically. That's what people do when they like each other, right? They call? That is what people do, yes. So do it. What's the worst that could happen? Everything, Cameron thought. I could let myself hope and have it destroyed. I could build something and watch it crumble. I could fail at this the way I've failed at so many things, but he didn't say any of that. Instead, he helped Autumn with her spelling words and checked Preston's math homework. And later, after they were both asleep, he sat on the small balcony in the cold night air and stared at the business card. 3 days passed. The card remained in his wallet, untouched. Cameron went to work, came home, took care of his children, and tried not to think about the weight of the decision before him. But the weight didn't diminish. If anything, it grew heavier with each passing hour. At the warehouse, Bryant and Garrett's confusion had curdled into resentment. They'd been robbed of their punchline, made to look foolish in front of their coworkers. Small acts of sabotage began. Cameron's equipment would go missing, his assignments would be mixed up, his break times would be accidentally shortened. Nothing he could prove or report, but enough to make every day a little harder, Dennis noticed. On Thursday afternoon, he pulled Cameron aside in the loading bay. They're making trouble for you. It's nothing I can't handle. Maybe, but you don't have to handle it alone. If they do anything actionable, you tell me. Understood? Thank you. Dennis studied him for a moment. Whatever happened at that lunch, you look different. Less heavy. Don't let them take that from you. That evening, Mrs. Cordova was waiting when Cameron came to collect the children. She ushered Preston and Autumn into her living room with cookies and cartoons, then turned to Cameron with her hands on her hips. 3 days, she said. Excuse me. You've been carrying that card around for 3 days, taking it out, looking at it, putting it back. Either call the woman or throw it away. This limbo is making you crazy. How do you know about Preston is worried about you? He tells me things. Smart boy, that one. He says you want to call, but you're scared. Cameron sighed. Of course I'm scared. Look at me, Mrs. Cordova. Look at my life. What do I have to offer someone like her? What do you have to offer? Her eyes flashed. You have kindness, integrity, love for your children, the courage to keep going when everything is hard. Don't insult yourself by thinking money is all that matters. It's not just money. It's everything. We're from different worlds. So were my husband and I, she said quietly. He was educated from a good family. I was a housemaid who barely finished school. Everyone said it wouldn't work. We had 43 years together before he died. 43 years of different worlds becoming one world. That's different. No, hee-ho. It's exactly the same. Love doesn't care about backgrounds. It cares about what's here. She tapped his chest. And here. She tapped his temple. If this woman gave you her number, she sees something worth knowing. Don't insult her judgment by deciding for her what she should want. That night, after the children were asleep, Cameron stood on the balcony and dialed the number before he could change his mind. It rang 3 times. He almost hung up. Hello? Vivienne's voice was warm, slightly distracted. It's Cameron. Cameron Carter. From the Café, Cameron. The distraction vanished, replaced by genuine pleasure. I'm so glad you called. I was beginning to think you wouldn't. I almost didn't. I wasn't sure if you really meant it. I wouldn't have given you my personal number if I didn't mean it. I'm particular about who has access to me outside of work. I just find it hard to believe that you'd want to, that someone like you would be interested in someone like me. There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. Cameron, I need you to stop thinking in terms of someone like you and someone like me. We're both just people. I happen to have made money, and you happen to be struggling financially right now. Those are circumstances, not character traits. They don't define our worth. Easy to say when you're on the winning side of those circumstances. Fair point, she conceded. But I remember what it's like on the other side. I remember shame and fear and the constant weight of not having enough. I remember people treating me like I was less than human because I couldn't afford nice things. So when I look at you, I don't see poor warehouse worker. I see a man who's fighting for his children, who shows up even when things are hard, who's honest about his struggles. That's worth more than any bank account. Cameron found himself without words. On the other end, he could hear soft sounds, papers rustling, the clink of a glass. Are you working? He asked. I was reviewing some contracts. Nothing urgent. I'd much rather talk to you. I don't want to interrupt. Cameron, you called my personal line. That means you're not an interruption. You're a choice I'm making. Now I have a question for you. Okay, would you like to have dinner with me? Or if dinner feels like too much, we could meet for coffee. Or take a walk. Whatever you'd be comfortable with, his heart hammered. A walk. Could we just walk? In Riverside Park, maybe? This Sunday afternoon? That sounds perfect. 2 o'clock? Yes, 2 o'clock. It's a date then. A real one this time, not a prank. After they hung up, Cameron stood on the balcony for a long time, staring at the city lights. Hope was a dangerous thing. It made you vulnerable. It set you up for devastation if things went wrong. But it also made you feel alive in a way that mere survival never could. Sunday arrived both too quickly and not fast enough. Cameron changed shirts 3 times before settling on a simple blue button-down, the same one he'd bought for the cafe. Preston watched this process with barely concealed amusement. You look fine, Dad. Stop fussing. I'm not fussing. You are absolutely fussing, Autumn added from the doorway. But you look handsome, like a prince in a story. I'm nobody's prince, sweetheart. You're our prince, she said with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old. And maybe you'll be her prince too. Riverside Park was nearly empty on a chilly October afternoon. Dead leaves skittered across the paths, and the bare trees stood like sentinels against the grey sky. Cameron arrived early, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets. His breath visible in the cold air. Vivienne appeared exactly at 2, dressed casually in jeans and a dark green sweater that made her eyes seem impossibly bright. She wore her hair down for the first time, falling past her shoulders in soft waves. She looked younger somehow, more approachable, though the aura of confidence remained. "Hi," she said, smiling. "Hi." They started walking without discussion, falling into step beside each other. For a while, neither spoke, content to simply move together through the quiet afternoon. It was Vivienne who finally broke the silence. "Tell me something nobody knows about you. That's a serious question for a first real date. I don't believe in wasting time. Life's too short for small talk when you could be having real conversations." Cameron thought about it. "I wanted to be a teacher once. History, specifically. I loved learning about how people lived in different times, how societies changed, how individuals could shape the course of events. I was going to college for it when I met Karen. Then she got pregnant with Preston, and we got married, and teaching school on a teacher's salary with a family to support seemed impractical. So I took warehouse work instead. Good pay, steady hours, benefits, practical. Do you regret it? Sometimes. Mostly, I regret that I didn't find a way to do both. But I don't regret Preston or Autumn. They're the best things I ever did. You could still teach. It's not too late. It is when you're 34 with no degree, 2 kids, and barely enough money to make rent. True, she said thoughtfully. But circumstances change. The impossible becomes possible. The door you think is closed sometimes opens. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Cameron asked, "What about you? Tell me something nobody knows." "I'm lonely," Vivienne said simply. "I have everything I thought I wanted: success, money, respect, influence. I sit in boardrooms and make decisions that affect thousands of lives. People seek my advice, my approval, my investment. But at the end of the day, I go home to an empty penthouse, eat dinner alone, and wonder what the point of it all is. I built an empire, but I have no one to share it with." "You were married before," Cameron said. "It wasn't a question. For 6 years. He was a colleague, someone I met while I was still building the company. Smart, ambitious, charming. Everything seemed perfect at first. But as the company grew, as I became more successful, he became more resentful. Every promotion, every achievement, every milestone became a source of tension. He wanted me to be successful, but not more successful than him. When I wouldn't make myself smaller to accommodate his ego, he left. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me something important. Some people love who you are, and some people love who they need you to be. The trick is finding someone who loves the real you, not the version they've constructed in their head. They walked past a playground where a few families watched their children climb and swing. Cameron thought about Preston and Autumn, about the life they'd built from the wreckage of Karen's death. Small and imperfect, but theirs. "Your children must be wonderful," Vivienne said, following his gaze. "They're everything I never knew I needed. Preston is so serious sometimes, so much older than his years. He tries to take care of me, which breaks my heart because he shouldn't have to. And Autumn, she's pure light. Even on the worst days, she finds reasons to smile. I'd like to meet them. If you're comfortable with that." "Not now, not yet, but eventually." Cameron's chest tightened. This was real. She was talking about the future, about integrating into his life, meeting his children. The weight of it was almost overwhelming. "I'd like that too," he said quietly. "But I need to be careful. They've lost so much already. I can't bring someone into their lives unless I'm sure. Unless you're sure I'll stay," Vivienne finished. "I understand. That's wise. I wouldn't respect you if you were careless with their hearts." They found a bench overlooking the river and sat together, watching the dark water flow past. The afternoon light was fading, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. "Can I ask you something difficult?" Cameron said, "Always." "Why me, really? I know what you said at the cafe about courage and honesty. But there are plenty of honest, courageous people in the world. People who could offer you more than I can. So why are you here on a cold October afternoon, sitting on a park bench with a man who's barely keeping his head above water?" Vivienne turned to face him fully. "Because when I walked into that cafe, expecting to disrupt a cruel joke, I saw you sitting there alone, and you looked terrified but determined, like you'd decided to face the firing squad with your eyes open. That took my breath away. Then we talked, and you didn't try to impress me or pretend to be something you weren't. You were just yourself, flawed, struggling, honest. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Everyone wants something from me. Everyone is performing, calculating, trying to present their best angle. You just were. That's why. I don't know how to be anything else. I know. That's the point. A jogger passed, then a couple walking a small dog. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the 2 people on the bench negotiating the terms of hope. "I'm afraid," Cameron admitted, "of this, of us. Of letting myself believe this could work. Good. Fear means you're taking it seriously. I'm afraid too. You? Of what? Of hurting you. Of being the wealthy woman who sweeps in and then leaves when things get complicated. Of proving right everyone who'll say this is just a whim, a phase, me playing at something that isn't real. I don't want to be that person, Cameron. I don't want to be another thing that breaks you. He reached out then, surprising himself, and took her hand. It was warm despite the cold air, her fingers slender and strong. She threaded her fingers through his and held on. Then let's make a deal, he said. We'll be honest with each other. Completely honest even when it's uncomfortable. If this gets too hard, if the differences between our lives become too much, we say it. No ghosting, no fading away, no wondering. We talk. I can do that, Vivienne said. I can absolutely do that. They sat together as the sun set, hands clasped, breathing the same cold air. And for the first time in 3 years, Cameron allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't something that had died with Karen. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Phone calls after the children were asleep, when Cameron would stand on his balcony and Vivienne would curl up in whatever corner of her penthouse felt least empty. They talked about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, small frustrations, large dreams. She told him about boardroom politics and difficult decisions. He told her about warehouse drama and Preston's latest report card. They saw each other when they could, which wasn't as often as either would have liked. Coffee on Tuesday mornings before Cameron's shift. A walk through the city on Saturday afternoon. Brief meetings that felt stolen from their regular lives, precious because of their scarcity. At work, the situation with Bryant and Garrett deteriorated. They'd figured out who Cameron was seeing, though he'd never told them. Someone had seen them together, or maybe they'd done research, but either way, the knowledge made everything worse. The sabotage escalated. Cameron's time card went missing twice, causing him to miss a paycheck that took 2 weeks to straighten out. His equipment malfunctioned in ways that seemed suspiciously convenient. Nothing he could prove, but everything designed to make his life harder. Dennis did what he could, but his hands were tied without evidence. Keep a record of everything, he advised. Dates, times, incidents. If they slip up, I want ammunition. At home, things were better. Preston and Autumn noticed their father's improved mood. The way he smiled more easily, the lightness that had crept back into his voice. They asked about Vivienne constantly, what she was like, what they talked about, when they could meet her. Soon, Cameron promised. When the time is right. That time came sooner than expected. Autumn's 8th birthday approached, and she made her wish clear. I want Vivienne to come to my party, she announced one evening at dinner. Cameron's stomach dropped. Sweetheart, it's going to be a small party. Just a few of your school friends here in the apartment. Nothing fancy. So, I want her there. She's important to you, so she's important to me. Preston nodded his agreement. It makes sense, Dad. If she's going to be part of our lives, she should be at important things. And Autumn's birthday is important. Cameron couldn't argue with that logic, even as anxiety twisted in his gut. The apartment was tiny, shabby, despite his best efforts to keep it clean. The party would be modest. A homemade cake, pizza from the cheap place down the street, decorations from the dollar store. Vivienne lived in a penthouse and made decisions worth millions. How could he invite her into this world of barely enough? But Autumn's hopeful face made the decision for him. That night he called Vivienne. I need to ask you something and I want you to be honest if it's too much. Okay, she said carefully. Autumn's birthday is next Saturday. She wants you to come to her party. But it's going to be at our apartment, and it's not going to be anything like what you're used to. It's going to be 8-year-olds running around a cramped space, eating cheap pizza and too much cake. If that's not something you want to do, I completely understand, Cameron, Vivienne said gently. What time should I be there? You don't have to. What time? 2 o'clock. I'll be there. And Cameron, please stop assuming I'm going to judge you for not having money. I remember being poor. I remember what really matters. It's not the size of the apartment or where the pizza comes from. It's being there for the people you care about. I care about you, which means I care about your children. I'll be there. After they hung up, Cameron stood on the balcony and wondered how he'd gotten so lucky and how long luck could possibly last. Saturday arrived with the chaos that birthday parties inevitably bring. Cameron had cleaned the apartment until it gleamed, rearranged furniture to create more space, and baked a cake from a box mix that Autumn had decorated with enough frosting and sprinkles to constitute a separate food group. 6 of Autumn's classmates arrived, along with their parents, who eyed the modest apartment with expressions ranging from polite interest to barely concealed pity. Mrs. Cordova came bearing tamales and wisdom. Preston helped organize games while trying to maintain his dignity as the older brother. At 2:15, there was a knock on the door. Cameron opened it to find Vivienne standing in the hallway, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, holding a large wrapped box and looking slightly nervous. "Hi," she said. "Hi, come in." She stepped inside, and Cameron watched as she took in the small space, the worn furniture, the toys in the corner, the crayon drawings taped to the walls, the general chaos of a children's birthday party in progress. Her expression didn't change. No judgment, no surprise, just warm interest. Autumn spotted her immediately. "You came!" she shrieked, running over and wrapping her arms around Vivienne's waist. Vivienne set down the present and returned the hug with natural ease. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss your birthday." "Happy birthday, Autumn. Is that for me?" Autumn pointed to the wrapped box. "It is. Should we add it to the present table?" "Can I open it now?" "That's up to your dad." All eyes turned to Cameron. He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Autumn tore into the wrapping paper with the enthusiasm of an 8-year-old, revealing a large art set, watercolors, colored pencils, sketch pads, brushes, everything a young artist could want. It was thoughtful and perfect, and probably cost more than Cameron's monthly grocery budget. "It's perfect," Autumn breathed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Your dad told me you love to draw," Vivienne said. "I thought you might enjoy having some proper supplies." The party continued. Vivienne helped serve pizza, played party games with the children, and cleaned up spilled juice without hesitation. She talked easily with Mrs. Cordova about recipes and with the other parents about schools and neighborhoods. She was warm, engaging, and completely at ease. Preston approached her during a quiet moment. "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" Cameron nearby froze. But Vivienne answered with perfect honesty. "I'm someone who cares about your dad very much, and I hope we'll keep getting to know each other better." "What do you think about that?" Preston considered this seriously. "I think if you make him happy, then I'm glad you're here." "That's a very mature perspective." "Someone has to be mature around here," Preston said with a small smile. "Dad tries, but sometimes he needs help. I've noticed that. Maybe we can help him together." After the party wound down and the guests left, Vivienne stayed to help clean up. She washed dishes while Cameron dried, working in comfortable silence, while the children played with Autumn's new art supplies in the living room. "Thank you for coming," Cameron said. "And for the gift. It was too generous, but it was perfect. She's a sweet child." "They both are. You've done an amazing job with them. I'm just trying not to screw them up too badly. You're doing much better than that." Vivienne dried her hands and turned to face him. "Cameron, I need to tell you something." His stomach clenched. Here it came. The realization that this was too much, too complicated, too far from her world. "My company is in the middle of a major merger. The next few months are going to be intense. Long hours, constant meetings, a lot of stress. I'm going to have less time than I want. But I need you to know that doesn't mean I'm losing interest or pulling away. It just means my job is demanding right now." Relief flooded through him. "I understand. You don't have to apologize for working. I know, but I wanted to be clear. No wondering, remember? We promised honesty. We did." He took a breath. "While we're being honest, things at work are getting worse. Bryant and Garrett are making my life difficult. Nothing I can prove, but it's constant. Do you want me to—" "No," he said firmly. "I don't want you to fix it. I need to handle it myself. I just wanted you to know." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but if it gets worse, if they cross a line, you tell me. Deal?" "Deal." That evening, after Vivienne left and the children were asleep, Cameron looked at the new lunchbox he'd bought Preston with money from his latest paycheck. Not the cheapest option, but a decent one that would last. Small improvements. Small steps forward. The beginning of hope turning into something real. 3 months into their relationship, Cameron could no longer deny what was happening. He was falling in love with Vivienne Ashcroft. The realization came quietly one Tuesday morning as he watched her laugh at something Preston had said during a phone call, her face lighting up with genuine delight. It terrified him. Love meant vulnerability. Love meant stakes. Love meant the possibility of devastating loss, and he'd already been through that once. He wasn't sure he could survive it again, but the heart doesn't ask permission. It simply feels. Vivienne's merger consumed her increasingly. Their phone calls became shorter, interrupted by urgent messages and late-night conference calls. She apologized constantly, which only made Cameron feel worse because she had nothing to apologize for. She was building something important. He understood that. He just missed her. At the warehouse, Bryant's campaign of harassment intensified. Small acts became calculated attacks. Cameron's work assignments were deliberately scrambled, making him look incompetent. Supplies he needed would vanish. His time clock entries were mysteriously altered, creating discrepancies in his hours. Then came the formal complaint. Bryant filed paperwork, claiming Cameron had been verbally aggressive toward him, threatening and unprofessional. It was completely false, but it went into Cameron's personnel file nonetheless. Dennis called him into the office, his face grave. "I know this is garbage," Dennis said, tapping the complaint form. "But my hands are tied. There's no witnesses either way, no proof. It becomes your word against his, and the company has to take all complaints seriously. And so what does this mean? It means you're on notice. One more complaint, legitimate or not, and there could be consequences. Suspension, maybe termination. I'll fight it if it comes to that, but you need to be careful." Cameron left the office feeling like the walls were closing in. He couldn't afford to lose this job. One paycheck away from disaster was the reality of his life. Bryant knew this. Bryant was counting on it. He didn't tell Vivienne. She had enough to worry about with the merger. Besides, what could she do? Swoop in and rescue him again? He'd meant what he said. He needed to handle this himself, but the weight of it pressed down on him, making every day feel like walking through deep water. The weekend brought a small reprieve. Vivienne, exhausted from marathon negotiating sessions, suggested something unexpected. "My company is hosting a charity event at the Botanical Gardens Sunday afternoon. Would you and the children like to come? It would give me an excuse to actually enjoy it instead of just working the room." Cameron's first instinct was to refuse. A corporate charity event meant wealthy donors, influential people, Vivienne's professional circle. It meant exposing his children and himself to a world where they clearly didn't belong. But Preston overheard the conversation and made the decision for him. "We'd love to come. Right, Dad?" Autumn bounced on her toes. "I've never been to a botanical garden. Please, Daddy, please." How could he deny them this? How could he let his own insecurity rob them of an experience they'd enjoy? "We'd be honored to come," he told Vivienne, hoping his voice didn't betray his anxiety. Sunday morning involved another wardrobe crisis. Cameron borrowed a suit from a thrift store, slightly too large but presentable. Preston wore his school clothes, the nicest he owned. For Autumn, Mrs. Cordova worked a small miracle, altering one of her granddaughter's old dresses to fit perfectly. "You all look beautiful," Mrs. Cordova said, straightening Cameron's tie. "Now go, hold your heads high. You belong anywhere you choose to be." The botanical gardens were breathtaking. Glass conservatories soared overhead, filled with exotic plants and flowers that transformed the autumn afternoon into an eternal spring. Well-dressed attendees mingled on manicured lawns, sipping wine and making conversation that probably moved millions of dollars. Cameron felt every eye that turned their way, every subtle assessment. His borrowed suit suddenly felt more obvious. Autumn's altered dress looked homemade because it was. Preston's too short pants revealed the truth about their circumstances, but then Vivienne appeared, resplendent in a navy dress that probably cost more than Cameron's monthly rent, and her face transformed with genuine joy when she saw them. You came, she said, embracing each of them in turn. You look wonderful, all of you. Come on, let me show you around. She didn't treat them like charity cases or embarrassments. She introduced them to people with pride. This is Cameron and his children, Preston and Autumn. Not the warehouse worker, not my friend from the other side of the tracks, just their names, offered with respect. The children were enchanted. They explored the conservatories with wide eyes, marveling at orchids and palms and flowers they'd only seen in books. Vivienne walked with them, pointing out interesting specimens, letting Autumn's questions flow without impatience. Preston stuck close to Cameron. Everyone here is rich, aren't they? Most of them, yes. Do you feel weird about it? Cameron considered lying, but he'd never lied to his children about important things. A little? But we're here because Vivienne wants us here. That's what matters. She really likes you, Dad. I can tell. I really like her too. A man approached, tall and silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Cameron's car had. He had the bearing of someone used to deference, to being the most important person in any room. Vivienne, he said, his tone carrying weight. Might I have a word? Of course, Richard. But first, let me introduce you. This is Cameron Carter and his children. Cameron, this is Richard Sutherland, one of our board members. Richard's handshake was brief, his smile perfunctory. Cameron recognized the look in his eyes, the swift calculation, the assessment, the dismissal. He'd seen it 1,000 times before. Charming, Richard said, though his tone suggested anything but. To Vivienne, he added, when you have a moment, we should discuss the Henderson proposal. I'll find you in a bit, Vivienne said pleasantly. After Richard left, she turned to Cameron with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry. He can be... It's fine, Cameron interrupted. I've dealt with worse. But later, as they sat on a bench watching the children examine a butterfly garden, Richard's words reached them from a nearby group of executives. I don't know what Vivienne's thinking, bringing him here. It's one thing to have a fling, but parading him around at a company event. It looks unprofessional, Cameron's jaw tightened. Vivienne heard it too. She stood, and for a moment Cameron thought she might confront them. Instead, she took his hand. Come on, let's get some food. The catering here is actually quite good. You don't have to pretend you didn't hear that. I'm not pretending anything. Richard Sutherland is a narrow-minded snob who peaked in 1987. His opinion means nothing to me. It means something to your board. My board trusts my judgment. And my judgment is that you're worth 100 Richards. She squeezed his hand. Don't let small-minded people make you feel small. They collected the children and made their way to the catering tent. The food was indeed excellent, far better than anything Cameron usually ate. Autumn declared the chocolate-covered strawberries the best thing she'd ever tasted. Preston methodically tried one of everything, his face serious as he evaluated each option. Vivienne stayed with them, ignoring the subtle and not-so-subtle attempts by other attendees to pull her into conversations. She laughed at Cameron's stories, played a spontaneous game of tag with Autumn, and discussed books with Preston with genuine interest. As the afternoon wore on, Cameron realized something. Yes, they came from different worlds. Yes, there would always be people like Richard who judged them. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was Vivienne choosing to spend her time with them. What mattered was his children's happiness. What mattered was the feeling in his chest when she looked at him, like he was enough, exactly as he was. Later, as they prepared to leave, Autumn presented Vivienne with something she'd made from fallen flower petals, a small, carefully arranged artwork pressed between two clear leaves. For you, Autumn said shyly, because you're beautiful like the flowers. Vivienne's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. She knelt down to Autumn's level. This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. I'm going to treasure it always, really. Even though you probably have expensive art and stuff. Especially because I have expensive art. This is better because it came from your heart. That night, after the children were asleep, Cameron stood on his balcony and called Vivienne. Thank you for today, he said. The kids had an amazing time. I had an amazing time. Your children are extraordinary, Cameron. You've raised them with such grace and kindness. I just try not to screw up too badly. You're doing more than that. You're giving them a foundation of love and integrity. That's worth more than anything money can buy." She paused. "Cameron, I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you. I've been falling for a while now, but today made it clear. Watching you with your children, seeing how you navigate a world that hasn't been kind to you with such dignity, I'm in love with you. I needed you to know that." Cameron's breath caught. The words he'd been afraid to say, afraid to even think too loudly, suddenly felt safe. "I'm in love with you too," he said quietly. "It terrifies me, but it's true." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I've lost someone I loved before. Because happiness feels temporary. Because I keep waiting for this to end." "Then let's make a promise," Vivienne said. "Let's promise that if this ends, it won't be because we gave up without fighting for it. Let's promise to be brave enough to believe this is real." "I can promise that." "Good, because I'm not going anywhere, Cameron Carter. You're stuck with me." After they hung up, Cameron looked at his reflection in the dark window. A man in love, a man with hope, a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to believe in tomorrow. He went inside, checked on his sleeping children, and allowed himself to imagine a future that included all four of them together. It was the best dream he'd had in years. The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, thin and impersonal. Cameron stared at it over his coffee, the words blurring together into one clear message. Not good enough. It was the fourth rejection in 2 months. Warehouse supervisor positions, logistics coordinator roles, anything that might offer better pay and more stability. He had the experience, the work ethic, the recommendations from Dennis. But he lacked the credentials, the degree, the certifications, the formal education that opened doors he couldn't access. The letter felt like a verdict on his entire life. Trapped, stuck, permanently relegated to the bottom rung because he'd made the practical choice years ago, because he'd prioritized immediate survival over long-term possibility. He folded the letter and tucked it into his wallet, another artifact of limitation. Then he got his children ready for school and went to work, because that's what you did when you had no other options. At the warehouse, Bryant had become emboldened. The false complaint had worked, putting Cameron on notice, making him vulnerable. Now Bryant pushed boundaries constantly, testing how far he could go. Tools went missing right before Cameron needed them. Shipments were rerouted without his knowledge, making him look incompetent when deadlines were missed. Small cruelties that added up to a hostile work environment, but all deniable, all explainable as coincidence or miscommunication. What made it worse was the why. Dennis had mentioned it in passing. Bryant had somehow discovered Cameron was dating Vivienne Ashcroft. The warehouse rumor mill had been working overtime. "He's eaten up with jealousy," Dennis said during a break. "Thinks you're getting something you don't deserve. Like success with women is something you earn through money or status. Maybe he's right. Maybe I don't deserve it." Dennis fixed him with a hard look. "Don't do that. Don't let him get in your head. You're a good man, Cameron. The fact that a successful woman sees that isn't luck. It's her being smart enough to recognize quality, but the doubt crept in anyway, especially during the long afternoons when Vivienne was unreachable, trapped in meetings that ran late into the evening. The merger was reaching its critical phase. She was exhausted, stretched thin, fighting battles Cameron couldn't help with. Their time together dwindled to stolen moments. A quick coffee before his shift. Late-night phone calls that lasted 5 minutes before she had to go. She apologized constantly, which made him feel guilty for wanting more of her time. One Friday evening, she invited him to her penthouse for dinner. The children were having a sleepover at Mrs. Cordova's apartment, a special treat that both excited them and made Cameron nervous about imposing on his elderly neighbors. Generosity. The penthouse was everything Cameron had imagined, and nothing like it. Yes, it was luxurious. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary, art on the walls that he recognized from magazines. But it also felt empty, impersonal, like a hotel room that someone lived in but never made home. I know, Vivienne said, reading his expression. It's too much. I bought it because I could, because it was supposed to mean I'd made it. But I've never felt comfortable here. It's beautiful. It's lonely. She led him to the kitchen, surprisingly modest given the rest of the space. I thought we could cook together. I'm tired of restaurants and takeout. I want something normal. They made pasta with vegetables, working side by side in the gleaming kitchen. Cameron chopped tomatoes, while Vivienne managed the sauce, and for a little while they were just two people making dinner together. Not CEO and warehouse worker, not rich and poor, just themselves. Over dinner the conversation turned serious. Tell me what's really going on, Vivienne said. You've been different lately, distant. Cameron set down his fork. Honesty, they'd promised. I've been applying for better jobs, trying to improve my situation. Every application gets rejected. I have the experience, but not the credentials. I could help with that. Recommendations, connections, no. The word came out sharper than he intended. I'm sorry, but no. I need to do this myself. I need to prove I can stand on my own, that I'm not just the man who got lucky dating someone successful. Is that what you think? That you're lucky? Aren't I? Look at where we are, Vivienne. Your penthouse, your life, everything you've built. And then look at me, a warehouse worker in a borrowed suit, barely keeping his head above water, dependent on— Don't finish that sentence, she interrupted, her voice sharp. Don't reduce yourself like that. And don't reduce what we have to some kind of charity case. I'm not, You are. You're doing exactly that. You're so focused on the money difference that you can't see past it. I don't care about your bank account, Cameron. I care about you, your character, your kindness, the way you love your children, the way you've survived things that would have broken other people. That's what matters to me. Easy to say when money isn't a problem for you. The words hung between them, harsh and true. Vivienne's expression hardened. You're right. It is easy for me to say because I have money now. But I remember what it was like when I didn't. I remember checking price tags and putting things back. I remember the shame of not being able to afford things other people took for granted. So don't tell me I don't understand. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're looking for reasons why this can't work. Like you're so invested in seeing yourself as not enough that you can't accept that I think you are. Cameron stood, suddenly needing space. He walked to the windows, staring out at the city lights. All those lives being lived, all those people with their own struggles and triumphs. Somewhere down there, in an apartment that cost a fraction of this penthouse, his children were asleep, dreaming their small dreams. I'm scared, he said finally. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you could have someone easier. Someone who fits into your world without effort. Someone who doesn't drag you down with his problems. He heard her approach, felt her hand on his shoulder. Cameron, look at me. He turned. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't want easier. I don't want someone who fits into my world perfectly, because my world is cold and calculated and lonely. You brought warmth into it. You brought realness. Your problems aren't dragging me down. They're reminding me what actually matters. Can you understand that? I'm trying. Then try harder. Because I'm getting tired of defending my own feelings. I'm tired of having to prove to you that I know what I want. I chose you, Cameron. Not in spite of who you are, but because of who you are. When will that be enough? The question hit him like a physical blow. When would it be enough? When would he stop waiting for the other shoe to drop? For reality to reassert itself? For the fairy tale to end? I'm sorry, he said quietly. You're right. I've been sabotaging this because I'm afraid of losing it. That's not fair to you. No, it's not. She took his hand. I'm not going anywhere, but you have to let me stay. You have to stop pushing me away with both hands while claiming you want me close. I do want you close. I love you. I love you too. But love isn't enough if we can't trust it. If you can't trust me, or trust yourself, or trust that this is real, then we have a problem. They stood together by the windows, the city sprawling below them, infinite and indifferent. Cameron thought about Mrs. Cordova's words, pride is expensive. What was he protecting by insisting on doing everything alone? What was he proving? I'll work on it, he said. The trust thing. I'll work on believing I deserve this. We'll both work on it, Vivienne said. Together. That's the whole point of together. You don't have to carry everything alone. They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about fears and hopes and the messy reality of trying to build something real. They argued and agreed and argued again, but underneath it all was the recognition that they were fighting for the relationship, not with each other. Late that night, as Cameron prepared to leave, Vivienne stopped him at the door. Stay, she said. Not for anything but sleep. I don't want to be alone tonight. He stayed. They lay together in her enormous bed, her head on his chest, his hand in her hair, and talked until they couldn't keep their eyes open. About everything and nothing. About dreams they'd given up and dreams they might rebuild. I'm glad you called me that day, she murmured, half asleep. After the cafe, I'm glad you took the chance. Me too. Promise me something. What? Promise me you'll tell me when things get hard. Not just the little things, the big things too. Your struggles at work, your fears, all of it. No protecting me from your reality, I promise. If you promise the same, deal. She fell asleep in his arms, and Cameron lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking about trust and fear and the courage it took to let someone in, to let someone see you completely and believe they wouldn't walk away. He thought about the rejection letter in his wallet, about Bryant's harassment, about all the ways his life felt like it was held together with duct tape and hope. And he thought about Vivienne, choosing him despite all of it. Maybe Mrs. Cordova was right. Maybe what he had to offer wasn't measured in dollars or credentials. Maybe it was measured in something deeper, the capacity to love fully, to show up honestly, to be real in a world that rewarded performance. Maybe he was enough exactly as he was. The thought felt revolutionary. The package arrived at Vivienne's office on a Monday morning, unremarkable brown packaging with no return address. Her assistant brought it in with the rest of the mail, setting it on her desk during a brief break between meetings. Vivienne opened it absently, her mind still on the merger negotiations that had consumed her weekend. Inside was a folder unmarked. She flipped it open. The first thing she saw was a photograph of herself and Cameron taken at the Botanical Gardens. Then another from outside Bellamy's Café. More photos, dozens of them, chronicling their relationship with unsettling detail. Coffee dates, park walks, Cameron leaving her building early one morning, her stomach tightened. Someone had been following them, documenting them. Beneath the photos were documents, printed social media posts, supposedly from Cameron, talking about targeting wealthy women. Messages that appeared to show him researching her before their blind date. A timeline that suggested the entire relationship had been calculated, premeditated. It was all fabricated, obviously blatantly fake to anyone who knew the truth. But to someone who didn't know Cameron, someone predisposed to doubt, it might look convincing. The final page was a typed note. Thought you should know what kind of man you're involving yourself with. A concerned party. Vivienne's hands shook with rage. This was calculated, cruel, and designed to destroy something real. She immediately called her head of security. I need you to trace the origin of this package. I want to know who sent it, where it came from, everything. But even as she made the call, she knew the real problem wasn't the package itself. It was where else these fabrications might go. Her board. The media. Competitors looking for leverage during the merger. The second call came an hour later from Richard Sutherland, requesting an emergency board meeting. Her stomach dropped. The boardroom felt hostile when she entered. 8 faces, most neutral, but Richard's expression was carefully concerned in a way that set her teeth on edge. Vivienne, thank you for making time, Richard began. We've received some troubling information regarding your personal life and its potential impact on the company. Let me guess, an anonymous package full of fabricated evidence? His eyebrows rose. You've seen it? I received the same package. It's fake, Richard. Anyone with basic computer skills could create those documents. Perhaps, he said carefully, but the optics are concerning. You're dating a warehouse worker who I met and chose to be with. My personal life is my business. Normally, yes. But during a sensitive merger, board members are expressing concern about judgment, about potential scandals. We can't afford distractions. Another board member, Patricia Langford, spoke up. What Richard means is that some of us worry about how this looks. Not the relationship itself, but the timing, the appearance of vulnerability. Vivienne looked around the table, reading faces. Some sympathetic, some uncertain. Richard clearly pushing an agenda. This wasn't about protecting the company. This was about control. I appreciate your concerns, she said evenly. But I won't be making decisions about my personal life based on fabricated evidence and optics. Cameron Carter is a good man, period. If anyone has actual concerns about my judgment or performance, present them. Otherwise, this discussion is over. It's not that simple, Richard pressed. The merger partners are conservative, traditional. If they get wind of controversy, then we'll deal with it. But I won't throw away someone I care about because of hypothetical concerns and fake documents. The meeting ended in tense stalemate. Vivienne returned to her office, her mind racing. She needed to tell Cameron, but how? How did you explain that someone hated you enough to try to destroy your happiness? She called him during his afternoon break. Something's happened, she said without preamble. Someone sent fabricated evidence to my board, suggesting you're using me, that our relationship is some kind of con. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, who would do that? I don't know yet. But Cameron, I need you to know I don't believe any of it. Not for a second. This is someone trying to manipulate me, and it won't work. Maybe it should. What? Maybe they're right about the optics. Maybe I am a liability to you right now. The merger is important. Don't, she interrupted. Don't you dare suggest we end this to make things easier. We promised to fight for this, remember? But if it costs you your company, it won't. I'll handle the board. I just needed you to know this is happening. After they hung up, Cameron sat in the break room, staring at nothing. Someone hated him enough to fabricate an entire conspiracy. Someone wanted to destroy what he'd found with Vivienne. The cruelty of it was staggering. Dennis found him there 20 minutes later. You look like someone died. Cameron explained the situation, his voice flat. Dennis listened, his expression darkening. I think I know who did this, Dennis said slowly. What? Bryant. I've seen him on his phone constantly, taking pictures, always watching you. I thought he was just being his usual self, but this is exactly his speed. Why would he go to such lengths? Because he's eaten up with jealousy. Because people like Bryant can't stand to see someone they consider beneath them succeed. Because cruelty is entertainment to him. Dennis paused. I might be able to prove it. How? Last week, I saw him leave his phone unattended during a shift change. I didn't think much of it then, but if he's been documenting you, building this case, there might be evidence on his phone. You can't just take someone's phone. I'm not suggesting that. But if he leaves it unattended again, and if I happen to notice it's unlocked, and if I happen to see evidence of a crime being committed, well, that's different. 3 days later, Dennis called Cameron after his shift ended. Get to my office, now. Cameron arrived to find Dennis looking grim, his computer screen turned toward the door. On it were screenshots, dozens of them, photos of Cameron and Vivienne, drafts of the fake social media posts, messages between Bryant and someone else, coordinating the campaign. I was right, Dennis said. He left his phone on his locker during break. Screen unlocked, messages open. I used my phone to photograph what I saw. This is all him, Cameron. Every bit of it. Cameron stared at the evidence, feeling sick. The level of obsession, of calculated malice. It was overwhelming. There's more, Dennis said quietly. Look at who he was messaging. Cameron leaned closer. The contact name was just initials. R.S. Richard Sutherland, Dennis said. Your girlfriend's board member. They're related somehow. I did some digging. Bryant is his nephew, the room tilted. This wasn't just workplace bullying. This was a coordinated attack from inside Vivienne's own company. Richard Sutherland had conspired with Bryant to destroy Cameron's relationship with Vivienne. This was never about me, Cameron said slowly. This was about getting to her, About undermining her looks that way. The question is, what do you do with this information? Cameron thought about it. He could expose Bryant, get him fired, maybe even press charges. But that would bring attention, scrutiny. It would make everything public, potentially affecting Vivienne's merger even more. Or he could stay silent, let Vivienne handle it her way, protect her from the ugliness. But then he remembered their promise. No protecting each other from reality? Complete honesty. He called Vivienne immediately. I know who sent the package. And it's worse than we thought. He explained everything. Bryant's obsession, the documented harassment, the connection to Richard Sutherland, the conspiracy that went all the way to her boardroom. Vivienne listened in silence. When he finished, her voice was cold steel. Send me everything Dennis found. Every screenshot, every piece of evidence. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment this started. I'm going to end this permanently. Vivienne, wait. If you go after Richard now during the merger, then I go after him during the merger. I won't let him use my company as a weapon against me. I won't let him destroy what we have because he thinks I should stay in my lane. This could blow up. It could cost you everything. And staying silent could cost me you. I know which loss I can't survive. Cameron felt something crack open in his chest. She was choosing him, actively, consciously choosing him over the safe path, over the easy solution. What do you need from me? He asked. Tomorrow, don't go to work. Call in sick. Come to my office at 10. Bring Dennis if he's willing. We're going to confront the board with everything, and I want you there. No more protecting you from my world. We do this together. After they hung up, Cameron sat with Dennis in the small office, processing. She wants us both there tomorrow. At a board meeting, Dennis whistled low. That's bold. That's very bold. Is it crazy? Baby. But sometimes crazy is the only sane response to injustice. Dennis leaned back in his chair. I'll go. Someone needs to represent the working people who get crushed by rich men's games. Cameron called Mrs. Cordova to arrange childcare for the next day. Then he called Preston and Autumn to say goodnight, listening to their innocent chatter about school and friends and the small dramas of childhood. I love you both so much, he said, when they were done talking. We love you too, Daddy, Autumn said. Are you okay? You sound sad. I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just thinking about important things. Is everything going to be okay? He thought about the board meeting tomorrow, about confronting Richard Sutherland and his nephew's cruelty, about standing up in front of wealthy, powerful people and demanding justice. I think so, he said. I think everything is going to be okay. And for the first time in a long time, he actually believed it. That night, Cameron took out his wallet and looked at the rejection letter he kept there, a reminder of his limitations, of doors that remained closed. Then he threw it away. Some doors stayed closed, but others were about to blow wide open. Tomorrow would decide which kind of door they were standing in front of. Cameron woke at dawn, after barely sleeping. The borrowed suit from the botanical gardens hung on his door, pressed and ready. Today, he would walk into a boardroom full of millionaires and demand accountability. The thought made his stomach churn. He made breakfast for the children mechanically, his mind elsewhere. Preston watched him with concerned eyes. You're nervous about something, his son observed. I have an important meeting today. With Vivienne's company. Are you in trouble? No, but some people have been causing trouble for us, and today we're going to deal with it. Autumn reached across the table and patted his hand. You'll do good, Daddy. You're brave. If only he felt brave. Mostly he felt terrified. Mrs. Cordova arrived early to take the children to school. She looked at Cameron's face and nodded knowingly. Today is the day, then. Today is the day. Remember, Hijo, you have every right to be in that room. Every right to defend yourself and the woman you love. They're just people. Rich people, yes, but still just people who eat and sleep and worry like everyone else. Thank you. Go. Stand tall. Make them remember that dignity doesn't come from a bank account. Cameron met Dennis outside Ashcroft Industries at 9:45. The building was glass and steel, soaring into the sky, the kind of place that screamed success and power. They both stared up at it. Ever been in a place like this? Dennis asked. Once. to pick up Vivienne for dinner. Use the service entrance. Today we use the front door. They did. The lobby was marble and chrome, echoing with the footsteps of well-dressed professionals. The security guard checked their names against a list, made a call, then directed them to the executive elevators. Vivienne met them on the 15th floor. She was dressed for battle, a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back severely, her expression calm, but her eyes burning with purpose. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking Dennis's hand before turning to Cameron. "Are you ready?" "No, but I'm here. That's all that matters." She led them to a small conference room. "The board meeting starts at 10:30. Richard doesn't know you're coming. He thinks this is just about the merger status. What's the plan?" Dennis asked. "I present the evidence. I explain the conspiracy. I demand Richard's resignation and Bryant's immediate termination. Then I let the board decide if they trust my judgment or his manipulation, and if they choose him." Cameron asked quietly. Vivienne met his eyes. "Then I walk away. The company, the merger, all of it. I won't stay somewhere that rewards this kind of behavior." "You can't mean that." "I absolutely mean it. I built this company, Cameron, but I won't let it destroy who I am. Some things matter more than success." At 10:15, Vivienne's assistant brought in documents, printed copies of everything Dennis had found, organized into folders for each board member. The evidence was damning. Photos, messages, the coordination between Bryant and Richard, the fabricated documents traced back to Bryant's computer. Cameron held the recording device Dennis had brought, small and unobtrusive. Dennis had recorded Bryant's confession days earlier, getting him to brag about teaching that warehouse nobody his place. Insurance, in case the screenshots weren't enough. At 10:30, they walked into the boardroom. 8 board members sat around a massive table. Richard Sutherland was at the far end, looking confident and comfortable. When he saw Cameron and Dennis, his expression flickered, surprise, then calculation, then careful neutrality. "Vivienne," he said smoothly, "I wasn't aware we were having guests at this meeting." "Last-minute addition," she replied, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Everyone, this is Cameron Carter and Dennis Crawford. They're here because what we're discussing today involves them directly." Patricia Langford, the board member who'd shown sympathy before, leaned forward. "What's this about, Vivienne?" 2 weeks ago, this board received fabricated evidence suggesting Cameron was using me, anonymous, designed to undermine my judgment during a critical merger. Today, I'm here to show you where that evidence came from and who orchestrated it." She began distributing the folders. Board members opened them, faces registering shock as they saw the contents. These screenshots come from Bryant Moss's phone, an employee at the distribution center where Cameron works. Bryant is Richard Sutherland's nephew. She let that sink in. He's been systematically harassing Cameron for months. When Cameron and I began seeing each other, that harassment escalated into a coordinated campaign to destroy our relationship. Richard stood. "This is absurd. You're basing serious accusations on stolen information from a phone, information that was observed in plain sight by a supervisor during a workplace investigation." Dennis interrupted. "I was investigating harassment complaints. What I found was criminal conspiracy." "And there's more," Vivienne continued. She nodded to Cameron, who pressed play on the recording device. Bryant's voice filled the room, bragging about the prank, the setup, how he'd gotten his uncle to help put that nobody in his place, how they'd fabricated evidence together, how they'd planned to force Vivienne to choose between her company and her relationship. The recording ended. Silence filled the boardroom. Patricia spoke first. "Richard, is this true? I was protecting the company." "That's not what I asked. Did you conspire with your nephew to fabricate evidence against Cameron Carter?" Richard's jaw tightened. "The relationship was inappropriate. She needed to see reason. So yes," Patricia said flatly. "You decided your CEO's personal life was your business. You decided to manipulate her using lies and manufactured evidence during a merger that could make or break this company." Other board members were nodding, expressions ranging from anger to disgust. "Richard," Vivienne said quietly, "you're done. I want your resignation by end of business today. And I want your nephew terminated immediately. You can't force me out. Actually, she can, Patricia said. You just admitted to conspiracy and fraud. What you did could open this company to lawsuits. You're a liability now, Richard. A massive one, another board member spoke up. I move for immediate suspension pending investigation. Seconded. The vote was swift. 7-1, Richard abstaining. His face went red, then white. You're making a mistake, he said, gathering his things. All of you. She's choosing a warehouse worker over the good of this company. She's choosing integrity, Patricia said. Something you clearly don't understand. Please leave. Richard left, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Vivienne looked around the table. I apologize for bringing this to you during the merger, but I won't apologize for defending myself and someone I care about. Don't apologize, Patricia said. You did the right thing. We should have listened better from the start. The meeting continued, but Cameron barely heard it. They'd won. Against all odds, against power and money and institutional bias. They'd won, later, outside the building. Cameron and Dennis stood in the autumn sunshine. That was something, Dennis said. That was everything. What happens now? Cameron thought about his children, about Vivienne, about the future that had seemed impossible just hours ago. Now we live. The boardroom felt different after Richard left. Lighter somehow, as if a poisonous presence had been removed. The remaining board members turned their attention to Vivienne with new respect. Walk us through the merger status, Patricia said. And please, be honest about whether this situation has compromised anything. Vivienne spent the next 20 minutes detailing the merger negotiations. Cameron watched her transform into the CEO she was, sharp, strategic, commanding. This was her element, her kingdom, and she'd risked it all to stand beside him. The Henderson Group knows nothing about this situation, Vivienne concluded. The merger is on track. Richard's removal might actually help. He was resistant to some key terms that would benefit our long-term growth. And your personal situation? Another board member asked carefully. I'm not judging, I'm asking practically. Will this become a media issue? It might, Vivienne acknowledged. But I won't hide it. Cameron is part of my life. If that's a problem for the merger partners, we'll address it directly. Patricia nodded. Honesty is the best approach, though I'd suggest getting ahead of any potential stories. Control the narrative before someone else does. The meeting adjourned with handshakes and reassurances. Cameron and Dennis were thanked for their courage in coming forward. It felt surreal. Outside, Vivienne leaned against the building, suddenly looking exhausted. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, she said. You were incredible, Cameron replied. We were incredible. You stood there in front of those people and didn't back down. That takes more strength than most people have. Dennis cleared his throat. I should head back to the warehouse. There's going to be fallout when Bryant gets terminated. I want to be there to manage it. Thank you, Cameron said. For everything. For seeing what was happening. For having my back. That's what decent people do, Dennis said simply. They have each other's backs. After Dennis left, Cameron and Vivienne walked to a nearby café. They sat outside despite the cold, needing air and space. What happens now? Cameron asked. Now the company's legal team handles Richard's exit. Bryant will be terminated today. And she took his hand, we figure out what comes next for us. There's going to be attention. Questions about who I am, where I come from. I know people will say terrible things. That I'm using you. That you're slumming. That we're some kind of publicity stunt. Let them say it. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters. Cameron looked at their joined hands, hers smooth and manicured, his calloused from warehouse work. Two different worlds, literally touching. I love you, he said. But I'm terrified this is just the beginning of the fight, not the end. It probably is, Vivienne agreed. But I'd rather fight alongside you than have peace without you. That's what love is, Cameron. It's choosing someone even when it's complicated. Especially when it's complicated, his phone buzzed. A text from Dennis, Bryant escorted out by security. Causing scene. Might want to keep distance from warehouse for few days. Cameron showed Vivienne the message. She sighed. You can't go back there. Not right away. It's not safe. I need to work, I know. But Dennis is right. Let things cool down. In the meantime, she hesitated. Would you consider taking a few days? I have vacation time I never use. We could go somewhere with the kids. Just breathe for a minute. I can't afford my treat. Please let me do this. Not as charity, but as someone who wants time with the people she loves without all this chaos. Cameron wanted to refuse on principle, but he was so tired. Tired of fighting, of struggling, of defending his right to exist in spaces that didn't want him. Okay, he said. A few days. With the kids. Vivienne's smile was like sunrise. Thank you. They made plans quietly. A cabin upstate, borrowed from a friend of Vivienne's. 4 days away from everything, the warehouse, the boardroom, the judgment and scrutiny. Just the four of them, building something that felt like family. That evening, Cameron picked up Preston and Autumn from Mrs. Cordova's. They could tell immediately something had happened. Did you win? Autumn asked. We did. The people who were causing trouble, they're gone now. Good, Preston said firmly. They were mean. Yes, they were. But, sweetheart, I need to tell you both something. Some people might say not nice things about me and Vivienne. About us being together. People might be curious about our family. It might be uncomfortable for a while. Preston considered this seriously. Because she's rich and we're not? Partly that, yes. That's dumb. Rich and poor doesn't matter for love. No, it doesn't. But not everyone understands that. Autumn climbed into his lap. Will Vivienne still want to be with us? Even if people say mean things? Yes, baby, she will. She promised. Then I don't care what other people say. She makes you happy. She makes us happy. That's all that matters. Out of the mouths of children, Cameron thought. Such simple wisdom. He told them about the trip, watched their faces light up with excitement. They'd never been to a cabin, never had a vacation that wasn't just a day at the free pool or the park. This would be an adventure. That night, after they were asleep, Cameron stood on his balcony one last time and looked out over the city. Tomorrow they'd pack. Tomorrow they'd leave this place that had been their whole world and step into something new. He thought about Richard Sutherland's face when the vote came down, about Bryant being escorted out by security, about justice, however imperfect, finally arriving. But mostly he thought about Vivienne's hand in his, about the promise they'd made to each other. To fight for this, to believe it was real, to trust that love could survive in a world determined to destroy it. The city lights twinkled below, infinite and indifferent. But Cameron wasn't indifferent anymore. He was awake, alive, fighting for something worth having, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt like he might actually win. The cabin sat nestled among pine trees, 2 hours north of the city, rustic but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by windows overlooking a small lake that reflected the autumn sky. It was the kind of place Cameron had only seen in magazines. But Vivienne moved through it with ease, showing the children their room, explaining how the fireplace worked. "This is amazing," Preston breathed, staring out at the lake. "Can we swim?" Autumn asked. "Too cold for swimming," Vivienne said. "But we can walk around it." "There's a trail." They spent the first afternoon exploring. The children ran ahead on the trail, their laughter echoing through the trees. Cameron and Vivienne walked behind, hands clasped, breathing air that tasted clean and new. "Thank you for this," Cameron said, "for giving us space to just exist. I needed it too. These past months have been intense. I forgot what it felt like to just be, without performing or strategizing or fighting. That evening, they cooked dinner together, all four of them crowded into the small kitchen. Vivienne taught Autumn how to make proper pasta sauce. Preston helped Cameron prepare salad. It felt domestic, normal, like a family that had been together for years rather than months. After dinner, they built a fire and played board games that Vivienne produced from a closet. Preston won at chess. Autumn dominated charades with her dramatic interpretations. Vivienne laughed with unself-conscious joy, and Cameron realized he'd never seen her this relaxed. Later, after the children were asleep, Cameron and Vivienne sat on the porch in the cold night air, wrapped in blankets, watching stars that were invisible in the city. "I've been thinking," Vivienne said quietly, "about what happens when we go back. The reality waiting for us, having second thoughts. No, never, but I'm realistic. Richard might make good on his threat to go public. The media might dig into your life, our relationship. Your children might face questions at school. I know. I want you to move in with me. Cameron's breath caught. What? Not the penthouse. I'll sell it. Buy something more reasonable. A house, maybe, with a yard. Somewhere the kids can have space. Somewhere that feels like home. I want us to build something together, Cameron. Not just a relationship, but a life. That's a huge step, I know. And if it's too soon, we can wait. But I've been thinking about what you said, about how we're always fighting to exist instead of actually existing. I'm tired of fighting. I want to just live with you, with Preston and Autumn. As a family, Cameron looked at the stars, processing. A house, together, the four of them under one roof. It should terrify him. Instead, it felt right, natural, like the next logical step in a journey that had started with a cruel joke and transformed into something real. What about money? He asked. I can't contribute equally to something like that. I don't care about equal. I care about partnership. You contribute in 1,000 ways that have nothing to do with money. Your love for your children, your integrity, your ability to see what matters. That's worth more than any financial contribution. Vivienne, let me finish. I'm not trying to rescue you or fix your life. I'm asking you to build a life with me. There's a difference. One is charity. The other is love. He turned to face her fully. I want that, all of it. A house, a life, a future. But I need you to know something first. What? Cameron pulled out his wallet, worn leather that had seen better days. From it, he extracted a small, faded photograph. Karen smiling, holding baby Preston. I loved her, he said quietly. I still love her in a way. She was my first love, the mother of my children. I need you to know that loving you doesn't erase her. It doesn't mean I've forgotten. Vivienne took the photo, studied it with gentle respect. I wouldn't want you to forget. She was important. She's part of who you are, and anyone who loves you has to understand that. You do, of course. Love isn't a finite resource, Cameron. You can love her memory and love me. You can honor what you had while building something new. That's not betrayal. That's being human. Tears blurred Cameron's vision. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You survived. You kept going. You stayed kind when the world was cruel. That's what you did. That's enough. They sat together in the cold, making plans. Practical ones, about schools and neighborhoods and how to blend their lives. About telling the children, about making it official. About facing whatever came next as a unit, rather than as two people fighting separate battles. Inside, Preston woke and padded to the window. He saw his father and Vivienne on the porch, talking intently, and smiled. Then he returned to bed, knowing without being told that everything was going to be okay. The next morning, they told the children over breakfast. Autumn squealed with delight, already planning her room. Preston asked practical questions about his school, his friends, whether they could bring Mrs. Cordova to visit. Of course, Vivienne said. She's family too. Anyone important to you is important to me. They spent the rest of their time at the cabin being a family, walking trails, playing games, talking about dreams and fears and the future stretching ahead. The children warmed to Vivienne completely, no longer treating her as Dad's girlfriend, but as someone who belonged with them. On the last evening, Autumn drew a picture, the four of them standing in front of a house holding hands. She gave it to Vivienne solemnly. For our new home, she said. So you remember we're a family now. Vivienne's eyes filled with tears. I'll treasure this forever. That night, after the children slept, Cameron and Vivienne made love for the first time, tender, meaningful, sealing promises spoken and unspoken. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking about everything and nothing until sleep claimed them. The next morning, they packed and prepared to return to the city, to reality, to whatever challenges awaited. But they returned together, united, no longer two separate people trying to bridge an impossible gap, but a family figuring out how to build something lasting. As they drove back, Cameron looked in the rearview mirror at his children dozing in the back seat, then at Vivienne beside him. and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of hope. The certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together, and that made all the difference. 6 months later, Cameron stood in the backyard of their new house, watching Preston teach Autumn how to throw a baseball. The house wasn't a mansion, just a modest 3-bedroom in a good school district, with a yard big enough for the children to play. But it was theirs. All of theirs. The merger had gone through successfully. Richard's departure had actually smoothed negotiations, as Patricia predicted. Vivienne's company was stronger than ever, and she'd promoted from within to replace the board seat. Someone younger, someone who understood that the world was changing. Cameron had finally found his footing professionally. A logistics company, impressed by Dennis's recommendation and Cameron's years of experience, had offered him a supervisor position with benefits and room for advancement. The pay was better, not executive level, but enough to contribute meaningfully to household expenses. Enough to feel like a partner rather than a dependent. Dennis had been promoted to warehouse manager, inheriting the role with enthusiasm and fairness. They spoke every week, grabbing coffee when schedules allowed. Some friendships, forged in difficult times, lasted forever. Mrs. Cordova visited every Sunday for dinner, official grandmother to children who needed one. She'd cried when they'd asked her to be part of their new family configuration, said yes through tears, and never missed a week. The media attention Vivienne predicted had materialized, but fizzled quickly. A few think pieces about cross-class relationships, some social media commentary, nothing that lasted. People moved on to other stories. The world kept turning. Bryant had attempted to sue for wrongful termination, but the case was dismissed when the evidence of his harassment and fabrication came to light. Last Cameron heard, he'd moved to another state. Good riddance. Richard Sutherland had tried to salvage his reputation, giving interviews about being pushed out unfairly. Nobody believed him. The business community had its own form of justice, and being exposed as a conspirator against your own CEO was a permanent stain. But those were old stories, old battles. Today was about something new. Cameron checked his watch. Almost time. He called the children inside, where Vivienne was setting the dining table with her usual precision. She'd insisted on cooking, her specialty, she claimed, though Cameron had learned she only really mastered about 3 dishes. It didn't matter. The effort was what counted. Is everyone coming? Autumn asked, bouncing on her toes. Everyone, Vivienne confirmed. Mrs. Cordova, Dennis and his wife, even Patricia from the board. She wanted to meet the family properly. This feels like a big deal, Preston observed, too perceptive as always. It is a big deal, Cameron said, meeting Vivienne's eyes. A very big deal. The guests arrived within minutes of each other. Mrs. Cordova brought tamales, naturally. Dennis brought wine and stories. Patricia arrived bearing an elaborate cake from the city's best bakery, claiming she couldn't come empty-handed to such an important occasion. They gathered around the table, an eclectic group bound not by blood or background, but by choice and loyalty and love. The meal was chaotic and warm, conversations overlapping, laughter flowing freely. After dinner, as they lingered over coffee and Patricia's excellent cake, Cameron stood and cleared his throat. The room quieted. 6 months ago we moved into this house as people trying to figure out how to be a family. Today, I think we've figured it out. He reached for Vivienne's hand. You've given my children stability and love. You've given me hope when I'd forgotten what it felt like. You've shown us that family isn't about where you come from or what you have. It's about who you choose and who chooses you back. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy, but real and solid and permanent. Vivienne Ashcroft, will you marry me? Vivienne's eyes filled with tears. You're supposed to get on one knee. I'm old, and my knees hurt, he said with a slight smile. Will you marry me anyway? Yes, absolutely yes, Autumn shrieked with joy. Preston grinned. Mrs. Cordova pulled out a handkerchief to dab at her eyes. Dennis clapped Cameron on the back. Patricia smiled with genuine warmth. They celebrated late into the evening. Plans were made, small wedding, family only, nothing elaborate. Just the people who mattered, witnessing promises that had already been lived. Later, after the guests left and the children were asleep, Cameron and Vivienne stood in their bedroom, their actual shared bedroom in their actual shared house, and held each other. "I still can't believe this is real sometimes," Cameron admitted. "It's real. We made it real. I love you. I love you too. Thank you for taking that chance 6 months ago. Thank you for calling me after that terrible blind date. Best terrible blind date of my life," she laughed. "We should send Brian a thank you card. His cruelty gave us this. Let's not get carried away." They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something lasting. The house creaked around them, settling into itself. Somewhere down the hall, one of the children murmured in their sleep. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but a collection of people who chose each other every day, who fought for each other, who believed that love could survive anything if you were brave enough to trust it. On the dresser sat a framed photograph, the four of them at Riverside Park, taken by a stranger months ago. Four people who'd become a family, not through blood or circumstance, but through choice and courage and radical, transformative love. Cameron looked at it, then at Vivienne, then out the window at the neighborhood where they'd build their future. The city lights twinkled in the distance, the same lights he'd stared at from his old apartment balcony, wondering if happiness was possible. Now he knew. Happiness wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you built brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. It was messy and complicated and required constant work. But it was worth every moment of struggle. "Come to bed," Vivienne said softly. "Tomorrow starts early. Tomorrow we have the rest of our lives. Then let's not waste a minute." They turned away from the window, from the city, from everything that had brought them to this moment. They climbed into bed in the house they shared, in the life they'd built together, surrounded by children who loved them and friends who supported them and a future that stretched ahead with infinite possibility. And somewhere in the city, in the cafe that had witnessed the beginning of their story, the same tables waited for the same crowds, indifferent to the miracles that sometimes happened between sips of coffee and cruel jokes, transformed into profound love. Life went on. People met and parted and found each other against impossible odds. Some survived their struggles, some thrived. Some discovered that the cruelest joke could become the greatest gift if you were brave enough to believe in it. Cameron and Vivienne had been brave, and that had made all the difference.